crumbled. That was fast. And the Crusaders are pushed back to Cyprus. The Hospitallers and the Templars, the Teutonic Knights, they all set up on Cyprus. And for me, this is where I see really the beginning of my period in regard to my wider PhD study, because to deal with not having any land wars anymore in any serious context, the order starts using boats a lot. And boats need rowers, rowers mean slaves, and you also get the growth of hospittal sugar production, and all of this means slaves get a kind of significance that they didn't previously have, especially in the sources. Anyway, the Hospitallers capture Rhodes so that they can have their own island and they can be in charge of themselves and rule their own little patch of land. The Templars get disbanded and the Hospitallers gain all of their possessions that they can get a hold of. The Templars kind of get disbanded for not doing anything, so the Hospitallers capturing Rhodes was kind of out of necessity as well. Anyway, move forward another 200 years of the Hospitallers doing quite well on Rhodes and growing sugar and doing naval warfare. They get kicked off of Rhodes and move to Malta. They're actually given Malta by the Holy Roman Emperor in return for a falcon every year. And they enjoy living on Malta for a good 200 years until Napoleon comes along in 1798 and abolishes slavery and kicks them off. The British then conquer it and bring back slavery. The Hospitaller use of slaves. Now, the Hospitallers use slaves for almost everything, so this is not an all-inclusive list. The master has personal slaves. He specifically has Muslim personal slaves that he takes to Europe to show off what the order's been up to. And he goes to the Pope and goes, look at these guys, I've just captured them, you should give us some money. There's a theme with the Hospitallers when they talk to people. To row galleys. Now this is the most significant probably in terms of the actual use of slaves in bulk quantities. The average galley in the 17th, 16th century has about 250 to 300 rowers. The order has between 5 and occasionally a ridiculous number of 10 galleys, depending on what they're up to, which means an estimate just for rowing galleys of between 1,500 and 3,000 slaves, which is a suitable group of people. Next up, building defences. The Hospitallers don't just use their slaves for building defences. If there's a threat of invasion, any slave on the whole of Malta is used and conscripted, and occasionally so are the town people. But very much this is a standard use of slaves where they are building defences, digging ditches, and the numbers in Malta are very difficult to estimate, but just based on what's left of the defences on Malta at the moment, there was a significant amount of work being done. Baking bread. I included baking bread. There's not a lot of slaves baking bread. There's about 20 or 30 who in the Hospitaller bakery. But it's really showing how the Hospitallers weren't using slaves for just one job. They weren't isolated from the order. They didn't go, well, you guys can row and we'll do everything else. Slaves were everywhere. They were in the armory. They were making weapons in the blacksmith. They were making sails for the ships. They were engaged in almost every aspect that I can find of Hospitaller life. And they even grew some sugar. So growing sugar on Cyprus equated for about 15% of the order's income in the 14th and 15th century. And that's quite a chunk of change. And they were producing tons of sugar. And this 15% of the order's income was actually almost worth more than the numbers itself, since this was sugar, this was money that the order could get to. They actually owned that, and it was nearby, rather than the money they had coming from Europe, which came when it felt like it, and sometimes you had to beg quite a lot to get anything. Or if there were 2 popes at the time, nobody would pay you anything because they all blamed it on the other guy. They also get some Caribbean islands. The order's Caribbean exploits don't particularly last very long. They only own them for about 15 years. It's one of those where as soon as the islands start making money, the French decide they want them or else. And the Hospitallers kind of take the or else for a little bit. And selling or ransoming of slaves. Now I've already said that the Hospitallers, I haven't already said that. The Hospitallers sell and ransom slaves. They sell slaves they don't want. They don't want women, they don't want old people, they don't want children. So if you capture a group of those, the Hospitallers tend to sell them. They ransom people that are worth something. If you're worth something, you'll get ransomed. And the way you can tell if someone's being ransomed or sold is all to do with price. If you're a fit, adolescent, typically male slave, your sale price